let's restart the class. So, we just talked about the long-term strategy for the PlayStation, Sony. Okay, so now just final question. Do you think Sony should have different positioning across international markets? So, in the UK, in Japan, in Korea, right? In China, in different parts of the world? Should Sony have different kind of strategy, different target market, different positioning? Or do you think it's better for Sony just to use global strategies, right? We also talked about the global and the local strategy. And Pepsi, most companies like Pepsi are using the global strategy, which is in headquarters we have the master brand or the similar brand, right? And the kind of graphic design and innovation and R&D together in the headquarters, right? It's global. And then local, we can fit our product to local national tastes, right? Like for the advertising or just adapt the product slightly for the national taste. So what do you think about Sony? Should Sony have some different positioning across international markets, or do you think just using global strategy is fine for Sony? So discuss with your partner.
다른 나라에서 쉽지 않을까?
좀 더 그러니까 한국 많이 접할 기회를 좀 막 시험
This is where Sony sells the PlayStation, right? Start here and then spread out to here. We saw the sales were a little bit slower in Japan than the other places. In Korea, not many people buy the Sony PlayStation. Sales are slower than the other markets. Okay. So then let's ask you two guys here, what do you think?
Sony has to have different positioning in each countries. Because in Korea, people don't buy PlayStation actually. So I'm not sure about other countries. They sell it a lot.
Yes, they sell a lot in the especially in the US and the UK, right? Europe. So they sell to hardcore teens and some small section of casual gamers in Europe and the UK. So in Korea, hardcore teens play PC games, not the console. So are you going to change your target market in Korea? Advertise to different section? Who are you going to advertise to in Korea?
Others who are interested in games.
Okay, so maybe older adults. Okay, so you're going to, in Asia, you're going to market more to older adults. Are you going to change the product? It's cheaper if we just make the same product, right? We have economies of scale, we just make the same console and sell it everywhere. That's the advantage of global strategy. But are you going to change the product or leave the product the same?
We're going to change product special for country.
Okay. Which countries?
Maybe for if compete China and Korea and Europe, we need different technology and Sony PlayStation not popular at China and Korea, but more popular at PlayStation. And that's why we need to.
So we already said that the Korean gamers prefer multiplayer, right? So you're going to have different technology, maybe add some multiplayer over the internet, right? You want to connect not multiplayer at home, you want to play with somebody who's far away, right? I would like to be able to play against my brother in Ireland, right, if I could. FIFA Online is just in Korea, right? I can play anybody in Korea or just randomly at the moment for the PC, that's a PC game. Okay, anything else you're going to change? Everything else is okay, leave it the same. Just change some technology slightly for the Asian market. Yes?
We discussed we would offer local advertising, local services like local Netflix, if Koreans do have something like that, or local music streaming.
Okay, so we're going to make more local specific adjustments, right?
And then we would also change the pricing, depends on the country.
Okay.
For example, Western Europe, we would make it more expensive than in Eastern Europe and stuff like that.
So how would you avoid the problem of people buying the PlayStation in Eastern Europe and selling it in Western Europe?
I wouldn't avoid that, but I don't know. Normally, I would say I don't go to buy a phone abroad, at least myself, even though I know it's way more cheaper.
Okay. And what about, I'm just telling you this is what happened before in these cases. Some exporter starts buying the cheaper price product. For example, a Swiss company Swatch made some watches. They sold the watches in the higher price in the US than in China. But some US importer started buying exactly the same watch from China and selling in the US. It's called arbitrage. So Swatch had a different pricing strategy for China. It was lower, right? But some American guys started importing the watches into China, into the US from China, right? It was a court case in the US that Swatch said it was the copyright, and the US company said no, because it's a Swiss company. It's not an American company, so it was a legal issue, right? Well, I'm just asking, how could you avoid that?
Maybe since it's an electronic device, so some chips inside or some registration numbers like iPhones have? Or?
Okay, so we saw this before with the videos, right? Some videos didn't work in one part of the world, only work in another part of the world, right? So you're going to make that kind of system for
Kind of
pricing.
licenses or
Okay, so if you look at the DVD, it costs 15 euros in the US, DVD of a new movie, right? But in China it costs just $5, right? But if you take the DVD from China, it won't work in the US DVD player. Okay. So they have that kind of, the companies in the US made a different pricing for China because they know that, first of all, in China there's a lot of illegal substitute, right? Downloading, you can find in the shop. In China you can go into a shop and buy a copied movie for just $1 or $2, right? And second of all, they know that it's not worth $15 for them to pay for the movie, so they make a different pricing strategy. So you suggest the same thing for Sony. Okay, anybody else? Yes?
South Koreans played more PC games than video games, as you told. So give South Korean more chance to play video games, like campaign, like actually at Sangmyeong University. University can make game classes from PlayStation 4. At that class, students students played PlayStation 4 and get participation to Game Expo or video games like that. Yeah.
So you mean some kind of, again, special marketing?
Yeah.
So special marketing in Korea, in the difficult market, in Japan or Korea where they have slow sales, right?
Yes.
Like introducing into the university, that kind of thing for students, right?
Getting academic scores and playing video games.
Trying to change the culture a little bit in Korea,
Yeah, game culture.
right?
maybe special social network inside for just for Koreans. For example, like Kakao Talk is here, so something just for them. So
Okay.
they can see results of their friends and
So Korean people like social networking, so
Mhm.
seeing the results and that kind of thing. Alright. So just on the point of changing the culture, Nestle went to Japan. Japanese people didn't like drinking coffee. So Nestle had a very long-term viewpoint. They wanted to change the culture of Japanese people from drinking tea to drinking coffee. So can you believe they started with selling coffee-flavored ice cream to kids? So, or the chocolate-flavored ice cream to kids. So when the kids were young, they got the taste of the coffee ice cream. They liked the ice cream, and then when they grow up, they start to drink coffee. So the young people in Japan these days are drinking coffee, but the older people are drinking tea. So Nestle was trying to change the culture over the long term in Japan. They also sell the ice cream, right? By selling the ice cream to kids, that kind of way. So you mean to try and take a long-term view, try to change the culture of Koreans? Do you think you could be persuaded to play the console? You already have a console?
No.
No? Too late for you, but maybe teenagers?
It can be possible.
Teenagers, the newer generation. If you get them young, then you can change them, right? Change their culture. Do you have any younger brothers or sisters who are teenagers? No? No? Okay. So do you have any more comment or question about this case study? No? Maybe I can send the video to Sony. Okay. Get some idea, right? Just in the short class. But Sony has their own strategy team and innovation team, right? So they'll spend time thinking about these things and then how to change their product and who to sell the product to, how to do the marketing, right? So then let's move on from the company and the industry, which we're talking about. We have to look at our competition, look at the industry that we are in, understand the industry, understand the forces in the industry, and make some kind of strategy. So then the next part is we're going to talk about is culture. So we're moving on from talking about the industry and the competition to talking about the market. And we're going to talk about, in the market, we're going to talk about culture, economics and politics, and legal area. Because every market has different culture, different politics, different law, different economy. People have different incomes. So we'll start with culture. So the first question we're going to ask, discuss with your partner, what is culture? Can you give a definition of culture? I ask you to define culture. If you look up in the dictionary, what's it going to say? Culture is? So write down, you can write down, what's your definition of culture? Write down the definition. Culture is what? Okay, so just take another minute to finish up your definition. It doesn't have to be same as the dictionary. Okay, so Yoon Sang-ho, what's your definition of culture?
The traditional ways of living.
Traditional ways of living. Veronica?
Yes. Culture is a set of values, traditions, and beliefs that is shared among one group of people.
So a set of culture, traditions, and beliefs shared between people. Okay. And Yana?
Culture, it is something that every nation has. It includes mentality of people, their habits, and also traditions.
Habits and traditions, something that people have, right? So can you give an example of a cultural difference between two countries? Wang, Esther?
Because the religion in India, Hindi, they don't eat beef, but in Korea, we like meat.
Okay. Some people eat beef. So what we're going to look at is the importance of culture to an international marketer, definition and origins of culture, elements of culture, cultural change, okay, and planned and unplanned cultural change. So here we can see this guy, Gerd Hofstede. He's a famous researcher about culture, probably the most famous one. He researched IBM when IBM had many offices in many different countries in the world. So what he did is he went around to the different offices and he interviewed the employees. So the employees in India, the employees in Africa, the employees in the US. And by these interviews, he made some research to measure the cultural differences between people. So this is his definition of culture. It's the collective programming of the human mind that distinguishes the members of one human group from those of another. So culture is a system of collectively held values. Do you understand values? So values is something which you live your life in this way. You think it's the right way to do things. Edgar Schein's definition: culture is the deeper level of basic assumptions and beliefs that are shared by members of an organization. So it doesn't have to be a country. Any group of people, group of friends could have their own culture. If you watch some reality TV, you can see like some program about young people in California. They even have their own language, right? They have their own words they use. That operates unconsciously and defined in a basic taken for granted fashion. So everybody just accepts that's the way things are. And the organization's view of itself and its environment. So this is, we heard one, that this is, if you look up in the dictionary, this is the traditional definition. We're talking about values, rituals, symbols, beliefs, thought processes. We learn this when we're younger, and we share it with other people. And then we transfer it from our parents to kids, from generation to generation. So we learn culture by growing up, adjusting to a new culture. So foreign students are now adjusting to a new culture. And also in our decisions about consumption and production. So let's look at each part. Here we can see the origins of culture. We'll talk about it in more detail. We have geography, climate, and so on. History, technology and politics, social institutions. This is where the culture comes from. Then we have the elements, like values and symbols and beliefs. And then we have consequences. We decide to buy something. It's what companies are interested in, right? Or management style. We already explained about Chrysler-Benz had a problem with cultural management style was different, right? So they had to separate. So what about geography? Geography includes the climate, the land, is it flat land or mountainous land? Animals, microbiology. So it has influenced history, technology, economics, social institutions and ways of thinking. Historically, the innovation spread east to west, quicker than north to south. So if you think about the old days, China and Europe, right? There was the Silk Road we already saw. So the innovations used to go from Europe to China, or China to Europe, right? East to west, in this kind of way. So there's a strong correlation between latitude, climate, and per capita GDP. And also being close to the sea and per capita GDP, right? There's also a correlation. Also malaria. You don't have malaria, you can have a higher GDP. Okay? Do you understand malaria? So geography also affects your income. Most of the world's cities are on the coast. If you look at China, Beijing, Shanghai, Korea, Seoul, Busan, right? In New York, California, in the US. Okay? So most of the geographic location of a country is also important. And if we're living in the extreme latitude, like the Antarctica or the Sahara Desert, climate is too bad, then people's income is not high. But if we live in the area, there's a mid area here where we go from Europe across, it's a nice climate, right? The GDP is higher. So history, our history of course affects our culture. So social institutions, like you said, religion or Hindu in India. India has some of the oldest religions in the world. From 6,000, 4,000 BC, they learned before writing, they learned by chanting. Do you understand chanting? So these days the new Hindu priest learns to chant. The same chant, more or less, they had 6,000 years ago. Consumer behavior. American values in the US are influenced by Adam Smith's book, The Wealth of Nations. So I think I explained in another class that America is influenced by its history. The first pilgrims who came to the US, they tried to make some kind of communist way or socialist way of living, where everybody shared everything. But it didn't work well. People didn't work hard, right? So they tried this for a few years, and then they decided to change, where everybody owns their own private property, everybody works for themselves, right? So then Adam Smith, he went on to write his book, The Wealth of Nations, and his idea is that everybody acts in their own interest, and by acting in their own interest, they promote good overall, right? So we can understand American culture by looking at the history. If you want to understand the Korean culture well, if you learn a little bit about Korean history, it helps to understand culture, right? Any country you go to, the history can help to understand culture. What can you tell us about Korean history that's important for Korean culture? Why are Korean people very polite to the older people? Is there any historical reason? Is it related to Confucianism? Confucianism. Do you know Confucius? 13th century Chinese religious leader, Confucius. You know Confucius? So, if we understand about Confucianism, it helps us to understand about the Chinese or Korean culture, right? Also, in the past, this religion was important. China also these days. So, in the Middle East, we had wars in the Middle East. So Coca-Cola couldn't sell their cola in the Middle East, right? If the Americans are bombing your house, are you going to buy Coca-Cola or the local brand? Probably the local brand, right? So the Arab people start to buy the local cola. So history can affect the people's culture and values. So I asked you guys already, so you can discuss with your partner and then talk with me. How have history and geography influenced culture in your country? So discuss with your partner.
시간이야. 맞아.
Okay, so first of all I'll tell you about Ireland. So Ireland had a history of occupation by the UK, so it's similar to Japan and Korea in a way. Ireland got independence in 1920. So Irish people, I explained before, they like to buy the national brand, Guaranteed Irish. Okay, when compared with the English brand or the Irish brand, Irish consumers have some preference for Irish brand, right? Sometimes even English brand or American brand, they prefer American brand sometimes, right? What about geography? Ireland is an island country. So Irish people like to take chances. Irish people take more risk than other people because they had, in the past, they had to leave the island, right, on boats, right, and emigrate a lot and take a lot of risks. So if we look at, later we look at Geert Hofstede's theory on different cultures, Irish people like taking risks, right? In the recent financial crisis, Ireland was taking too much risk, so it had a problem compared to other countries. Okay, so what about in Russia? Russian students?
Russia is a very big territory.
Yes?
And we can divide Russia on two parts, Asia part and the Europe part.
Yes?
For example, in Asia we prefer to use, our people prefer to use some products from Asia because it's more close than product from Europe. For example, I know what on Kamchatka, where my friend lived, she used a lot of products from Japanese. Also, they prefer to use some car from Korea and Japanese too. Kia and Hyundai is very popular, but for Central and Europe, Russia, Hyundai and Kia not so popular. For example, as maybe BMW, for example, because BMW is Europe car. Yeah, it's more.
So which part of Russia is on the Asian side? From where? You can show us.
Yeah. For example, I think Ural Mountain will be here. Ural Mountain is as abroad. It's abroad, is part of here. It is Europe part.
And where are you from around here?
I'm from Ural Mountain.
Around here?
Yeah.
Yes. And you guys?
We live near Moscow.
Near
From
Moscow?
southern part.
Southern part of Moscow.
I'm from here.
Used to be Leningrad. Used to be Stalingrad.
I'm here very hot. Here very cold. It's also depend of also influence our culture and here. It's just Asia part.
Okay, so all along the border is more
Asia.
similar to Asia.
Yeah, and we of course prefer Chinese products and Korean products. Here we prefer use Europe products.
Okay. What about the history?
History, our country, independent country, we have a lot of war, and that's why our modern weapon more powerful than other country, and we don't have we have a hard industry. It is more.
It's very hard to beat Russia in a war.
Yeah.
Napoleon tried, but lot of times they came from Europe, right? Napoleon came across and came into Moscow and had to go back again. And then also Hitler, the biggest war in the world. Where you live near Stalingrad was one of the biggest, used to be Stalingrad, the biggest wars in the world, right? But Russia won. Well done. So Russia has a history of...
About history, for example, one moment, okay? Europe part is more... For example, yeah, maybe Sibir, Taiga, our people prefer to use national brand because it's part more traditional than Europe part.
Okay.
Because here a lot of forest, snow, and not popular as Moscow and Kazan, maybe.
Okay, so thank you. Alright then, what about China? Here's China. How has geography or history affected the culture in China?
The history. So we have 1,000 years, 3,000, maybe 3,000 years of the dynasty, the feudalism, and Confucianism is good for the dictators to control the people, and so we have strict. After the 1,000 years, we developed a strict position system
Well, people follow the directions from the higher level person in China?
Yeah, in the old days, and now it's different. And the geography, so we have a long coastline, and it influenced people in our lifestyle, like eat, like our foods, we eat fish more, and
okay, so especially along the coastline, people eat a lot of sea and fish products. Most people in China live along here, right?
yes.
This area. Hong Kong, Shanghai, Beijing.
Yeah.
Right. What about Korea? How has the history or geography affected Korean culture?
One major example is Han River. Yeah. In the middle of Han River, there is a city came out and becomes Seoul and other cities now, and surrounding South Korea, Yellow Sea, East Sea, South Sea.
Surrounded by the sea, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So what effect on your culture?
Trading of ships developed very well, and
So your shipbuilding industry is
yeah.
one of the world's best, and just like Ireland, Korea is one of the most globalized countries in the world. Trades with other countries a lot, right?
Yeah. And technique of making ships also, yeah, developed very well.
Okay.
Recently, yeah.
And no comment about the history, how the history affects Korea?
It is the same as China. There is a dynasty. Yeah, there is a dynasty from the century to century.
Okay, so in Korea you have higher power distance, right?
Yeah.
Higher power distance, the higher level person is higher than the lower level person.
Yeah.
Okay, very different from Denmark or Ireland, is probably the biggest difference between Denmark or Ireland and Korea is power distance. We'll talk about it in a minute. Why power distance means you're the manager, top manager, right? Can you talk to the intern? Can you talk to the low-level person, right? In Denmark or Ireland, maybe the top manager can meet you at the water cooler. They ask your opinion about the company or something like that, right? Not much power distance. But in Korea, you have more layers, right? And it's very hard to talk to the people at the top. Okay. So, what about Denmark?
Wow.
Maybe we can talk more about our home countries in this case.
Okay, Czech
But
Republic.
anyway, Denmark, we can see they were brothers, like kind of brothers, all the Scandinavian countries, and they still are.
Yes.
Very close to each other compared to the rest of the.
And I can see maybe just one point that
Here are the Scandinavian countries, right? Norway and Sweden.
Danish people, they let their kids outside when they're even like a couple of months old, because when they let them yell, you know, so they are becoming independent and they just don't scream like on the parents. And it's really common in Denmark to let the kids outside.
So they want to make their kids more independent.
Yes, and then when they're 15, 18, they left their homes. And I think it's also like when you see a Danish landscape, there is a house, there is a house, there is a house, and you can see houses everywhere. They really enjoy to have a house in the middle of nowhere. And so you can see a lot of them in the forest.
Okay, so if we look at Gerd Hofstede, we have collectivism and individualism is another thing. Do people like to do things together? In China we have Renao. What does Renao mean? Renao? I'm pronouncing it wrong. People all like shopping together or going on the tourist trip together. They see a lot of people around one shop, they want to go there too. So people like doing things in a group, right? Especially you can see the tour operators in China. People go on the holiday together in a group. Okay, so collectivism is higher in China.
Yes.
But you're explaining why individualism is higher in Denmark.
Really bad explained anyway, but yeah, it was true.
Okay, and what about the geography?
Yeah, we can see what you basically said, that it's surrounded by the sea. For example, the city we live in, it's also there is a sea just going through the city.
Okay.
And
How does that affect the people?
more jobs, for example.
More jobs?
I think the main
working on the
geographical feature is that it's like kind of separated from the rest of Europe, these three Scandinavian countries, so
And
they're together.
they really enjoy canoeing, for example.
Okay.
But we can't enjoy it in the Czech Republic, or we can, but we don't.
Okay. So if you look at, just talking about the income as well, you can see that if you look at China, the income in Shanghai or Beijing is very different than the income inland here, right? So the people are earning the higher income here along the coastal area. So then, let's finish there for today. So it was a nice discussion. You made some good points about the Sony case. So well done. Well, have a nice weekend.
Thank you.